All right. All right. Well, good morning, and Amy and Eric, thank you so much for being a part of this conversation. And I just wanted to give you an opportunity, maybe introduce yourselves and talk about a little bit about what you do through Community Christian Church.
Sure. I'll start. How's that? My name is Amy Summer, and I am the Restore Champion. That's sort of my title that covers everything that I do. And then under that, I am the Director of Community 412, which is all of our serving opportunities that happen outside of the building. So you have serving opportunities inside, like kids and first impressions and things like that. But everything that we do as a church outside the building falls under my purview. And then I also help run and direct Community Freedom on a national level. So we're working with churches around the country to help them plant locations in prisons instead of a location in a suburb or something like that.
Great, thank you. Thank you.
So as you heard from Amy at Community, we're not allowed to wear just one hat. They get the most out of us. So I am the coordinator for Community 412, so I'll work closely with Amy, specifically out of the Naperville Yellow Box. We do most of our Restore work in the community of Aurora, which I live in, and it's a neighboring community of Naperville. But also what occupies most of my time is I'm the pastor of our Community Freedom location at the Joliet Treatment Center. And also we have a second location at the Fox Valley Transitional Center in Aurora, which is an all-women's facility.
That's great. Okay. All right. Well, thank you all for being here. Amy, I want you to start off by explaining to us, when we had our initial conversation, you talked about the sort of the three movements of community. Explain a little bit about those movements.
Sure. So at Community 412, we really kind of are looking at how do we address engaging in the community and restore work within the community. And we coordinate those into kind of three different buckets. So we look at what are the things we can do to provide relief, so that immediate relief, it's not resolving any issue, it's just meeting an immediate need. So you can work in a food pantry and feed someone for the day, but they're going to be hungry the next day. So we're just meeting relief needs there. And then there's people development. So what are we doing to help develop people, to grow them, to help them become more of who God intended them to be? So mentoring, our citizenship tutoring kind of falls under that category. And then the third bucket is community development. So what are we doing as an organization to kind of press against those systemic issues that are happening in the world that we see? And how do we engage in making changes that will change the way the world operates?
Great, that's great. So translating that into the work that you're doing in Aurora. So I know Aurora is a unique environment to do ministry, given some of the social complexities, and in some respects, some of the poverty and injustice that is found within that community. Can you talk to us a little bit about some of the restore work that's being done in Aurora itself?
Yeah, well, and I think Aurora is a really unique place that a lot of people don't know about. It has a really large immigrant community, not only like first and second generation immigrants from Mexico, Hispanic, but also around the world. World Relief has one of their largest offices there. So resettling refugees from around the world, you're seeing that as well. And one of the things about Aurora that like really struck me, I saw a map one day of the city, like Chicago and its suburbs. And you look at Chicago, and inside the ring of Chicago, you see like ACT scores of 14, 15 as an average. And then you see the kind of collar communities, the suburbs that have ACT scores like 25, 22, 23, 24 as averages. And if you look out right on 88, there's this little dot in the middle in Aurora that has those 14, 15 average ACT scores. So you're looking at the reflection of what some, what poverty, what lack of resources looks like in an ACT score. You're seeing that same reflection that you see maybe on the south side of Chicago. You're seeing that actually in Aurora in a very small pocket, but you're still seeing that. So Aurora has a ton of resources available, a ton of nonprofit organizations that are working within the community to help support that community so that they can, achieve all that God intended for them to achieve.
That's great. And so what are some of the kind of work does that look like on the ground, Eric, as they're in Aurora for community?
We have partnerships with, I believe, 12 to 14 different organizations in Aurora. We do some work at an organization called Hesed House, which serves homeless population. We run some mentoring there for the kids and programming for the adults out of that Hesed House. We have a really close partnership with them. We send volunteers to serve in their kitchen, where we serve meals to individuals who are homeless. We have partnerships with the Aurora school districts. We run kids mentoring programs, and we help them with homework and after school programming. So we just try not to recreate the wheel and just partner with organizations that are already doing great stuff. And we just kind of feed them manpower, resources, money to kind of get these things, kind of to that next level of participation and affecting the people in the community.
That's great. We've been talking a lot about the idea of partnership and not having to reinvent the wheel. So I love that's a consistent part of your conversation. Another thing that I think I really appreciated in what you were saying is that you're able to look at a series of indicators as to need. So how all of these systemic issues tie into one another, right? So it's not just a poverty issue or a segregation in terms of how a community is set up. It also works itself out within the context of education, or what we're experiencing right now with COVID, this idea of healthcare, right? We're seeing the disproportionate effect on underserved communities, and that should be revelatory for the church in terms of our systemic engagement and what we do about that and where we go next. And so I really appreciated you being able to identify how that is even understood within the context of education. That's really helpful for us.
And it's so interconnected. I mean, all of that is interconnected, which is encouraging, because if you can work together, like you make a shift in everything, but also discouraging in that there's so much tied to the reasons that people find themselves in poverty. There's so many things that are connected that are continuing to press down, which is hard.
Absolutely. And so follow that trend out, then you can also see some of the educational indicators in terms of then future incarceration.
Mm-hmm.
So again, all of these are well woven. So the question oftentimes for the church is, where do we begin? But what I think I love is that you're, and too often that stalls churches out from doing anything.
Mm-hmm.
They're afraid of beginning in the wrong spot when in fact I think we're just called to start somewhere. And then the more you lean in, the more opportunities begin to expand before you. So then
I was just saying, add to that, I think we think of like incarceration as this really big, like it's so overwhelming. How do we even start? And there are so many places to start, but even one of them is the grade level reading at 4th grade. And they build prisons based on grade level reading at 3rd grade. So if as a church, we can go in and do mentoring and tutoring and help students in under-resourced areas learn how to read, they have a better chance of graduating from high school. If you graduate from high school, you have a better chance of not going into prison. So there's like these things that we can do even in the smallest ways that are vastly influencing the larger trajectory.
That's great. No, that's so helpful. So helpful. One of the stories that we highlighted in this is Lipscomb University down in Nashville. They've launched an education program where someone can get an associate all the way up through a bachelor's degree from Lipscomb in the women's prison in Nashville. And even those, and I sat in one of the classes when I was going through one of my programs, even those who know that they may never get out, it still is a game changer in terms of a sense of dignity, self-efficacy, the ability to see themselves as a contributor, even in the environment that they find themselves in. And so I imagine much of the work that you're doing in terms of these prisons that you're establishing church is about, even for those who may not get out or get out anytime soon, there is a substantial shift that a person goes through in the way they see themselves and the way they see themselves in relationship to others in the prison. So if you could talk to us a little bit about how community freedom begins to set up and establish the church presence there, and then what does it look like as you're working with the inmates, and what are some of the outcomes that you've seen?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to start, and then I'm going to let you go, Eric.
Okay.
So I would say that for us, what we're trying to do with Community Freedom is really help the church reimagine what it looks like to do prison ministry. You know, I always tell people, we aren't bringing Jesus into the prison. Jesus has been in the prison for a long time. Like Matthew told us to come visit Jesus in prison. So the church isn't bringing Jesus into prison at all. What the church is doing is creating community, which does not grow naturally. Healthy community doesn't grow naturally in the prison setting. So what the church is doing is what we do really well, is bring community into the prison setting. And so for Community Freedom on a national level, what we're trying to inspire churches to think about is, it's not just about a service. It's not just about small groups. But really saying, we want you to launch a location in a prison. We want you to develop community. We want you to invest in that community the way you would invest in any other location. So you always have church on Sunday. Your small groups continue to go even if there's a storm. If your pastor leaves and moves on to another location, you hire a new person. So you're committing to that community. And what you're saying to those individuals who probably for a lot of their life haven't had like steady commitment of individuals who've said, hey, we're committed to you, we believe in you, we value you. You're saying, we're going to be with you while you're in prison, and when you leave, we'll walk alongside you when you go home, and we will help you return and do our best to help you return, find your way back to God, find your way back to your community, find your way back to your family. Like, that's the goal of the church, which is different than, let's go in and do a Bible study about Jonah.
Right.
It's a different vision. So I'll let Eric kind of talk about how.
Yeah. So I'll kind of piggyback on what Amy was saying. A lot of our work is again, it's not necessarily bringing the church in, as Amy said. It is reframing our paradigm of what the church actually is from a biblical standpoint. So it's pushing us back to our understanding of the core tenets of our faith in Christ. And as you mentioned, Jeff, there's a lot of organizations. North Park is doing a similar program where they're going into Statesville Prison in Joliet, and they have an educational system where guys can get all different levels of education while they're incarcerated. And even those who are still serving life and will not get out, they're great assets to the church. And the church is not brick and mortar. It's not a place. It's a people. It's a people that God designed as an organism to spread his nature and his character to all places of the earth. So if there's people there, then we are responsible to reach those people and to connect with those people. So, prison ministry has a connotation that some people can say, well, that's for me, or that's not for me, or God hasn't called me to do that. But I would dare to challenge people to say that if there are people there, then we are called to be there as a church, or to connect with the church that is there. So, there are a lot of different assets. And I say that from a kingdom perspective, a lot of different assets that are already in prison, incarcerated, that are mature believers who are looking for a place to connect with other believers that share their same faith. And so that's kind of the paradigm. I find that we're able to do great work behind the bars, but not really because of who we are as individuals. It's because we realize we're the church, and we identify with the church that's there, and connecting with those resources within the kingdom, we're able to then expand God's kingdom, whether it be here on this side of the wall or there on that side of the wall. So Community Freedom is all about building community and building those relationships. And we value those relationships just like we do in our, the church outside the walls, or even in our own families. And that's what makes a difference. It's not just teaching a lesson or having a Bible study. It is authentically building those relationships and caring about those people, their lives when they're there, and also when they go out.
And I would just say too, seeing, being the community that helps people recognize the image of God in themselves.
Yes.
And helping people just to see that in themselves. That is a game changer for people to when they really accept and see themselves as an image bearer. It changes the way they see the world. and community freedom then provides the opportunity for them to find purpose in the world in new ways, which is it's awesome to watch.
I love the holistic approach in this. This is, too often when I've seen jail and prison ministry done, it's almost like we act as a service provider. And that does nothing. I don't want to say that. I don't want to seem too critical. I'm thankful for anyone who does the work of going into difficult settings to do ministry. One of the things I think we have to be careful of is for those who've had dignity stolen from them consistently throughout life, that we would in any way perpetuate that stealing of dignity. And to reframe this within the context of building community and helping them discover and live into the Imago Dei, the image of God at work in their lives, is such a beautifully holistic approach that I think has deep and meaningful impact. So let's talk, just as we finish and conclude here, if you just maybe share a story of some of the change that you've seen some people experience in the midst of Community Freedom's work in the prisons, and maybe a story or two that you've just stands out to you as saying, my God alone did that.
Yeah, I have so many.
I can't wait to find out which one you tell. I've got two that I think you might tell.
Okay, I'm gonna lead with one that I had, and this is really from the perspective of our volunteers, because a lot of the work we do is reshaping the mindset of our volunteers to not see the people incarcerated as bad people or dangerous people or something to be afraid of. And so I tell this story to kind of to humanize the people that have gone through different circumstances and may find themselves incarcerated. When I was out at our Community Freedom location in California, I was able to give a message there to the men, and there were probably about 90 to 100 men there. And there was one, afterwards we broke up into small groups, and there was one gentleman there who was in his upper 30s. He had been incarcerated for about 20 years, and he had a life sentence. He had been in prison since he was 18 years old. He began telling a story in the small group about how when he was younger, his father was very abusive, and he used to abuse him and his mother, and he grew up with a lot of anger and resentment towards his dad. And one day when he was 18, he was in high school. He was a basketball player, had a scholarship to play sports in college, and he got in an altercation with another young man. And during this altercation, he said he had this flashback that triggered something his dad did to him physically. And he snapped, he lost it, and attacked this young man and beat him and accidentally, killed him. And he said he got so scared, he was on the run and he got scared, but he eventually turned himself in. But through the course of the story, at the end of the story, I should say, he said, I wonder what my life would have been if I had a good father. He said, because that moment I can't take back. I'd never been arrested before. He said, because I was a young Black male in a impoverished community, I couldn't afford a good attorney. I didn't have good representation. I look back, I could have gotten a lesser charge. But when I tell that story, I don't tell the story of someone who's a killer at heart. I tell a story of a young man who went through some circumstances and had a situation that he handled poorly, made a poor choice and had a bad reaction because of how he was raised, regrets that decision, and now he finds himself incarcerated. So the prison is filled with people like that, good people at heart, made poor decisions, and are looking for a second opportunity. So that kind of strips you of this big bad image that a lot of these guys have. They're just like you and me. They just raised in different circumstances and different situations. Yeah. So I'm interested to see what story Amy has.
That wasn't actually one of the two that I had.
Okay.
I think one for me that stands out is at our Joliet Treatment Center facility. We have a great group of guys who had been meeting and were able to meet for a long time. Now things are different with COVID. But about maybe 3 months ago, Eric was at one of our Sunday morning services, and one of the guys came up and said, "Hey, how do I tithe to my church?" And Eric tells the story. He's like, there was a part of me that was about ready to say, no, you don't need to worry. He's like, and I felt like God was saying, don't interfere with what I'm trying to do here. Mm-hmm. And so Eric was like, I don't know, but I'll figure it out. And then about a month later, we get a check in the mail from the Joliet Treatment Center Foundation, which is a $20 gift to his church, of his opportunity to tithe. And we were all like, oh my gosh, like this is so crazy. And I think there's two things that I think are really amazing to think about. It is, number one, like when you were in prison, your salary is 25 cents to $1. So that's a lot of money for mm-hmm. somebody who's in prison. Mm-hmm. And number two, we just happened to have a series on generosity that was happening at church. And so we used this example of generosity for our whole church to say, look, this guy in prison is teaching us how to be generous. And I just think that's such a beautiful thing that God is doing for us who originally were like, mass incarceration is an issue, we should do something about it. Like that he's using that to teach us about generosity is such a beautiful thing. And it's just it's amazing to watch the way God is using, the way he's lifting up leaders. I mean, we have leaders in our church that are being a part of Community Freedom who have never volunteered before, never felt like they were, they belonged or had anything valuable to give because of their past. I mean, we're seeing God grow those leaders. But we're also getting to help people. Like I think about Alexander who was released a few months ago. And who was like, I only came because my buddy told me I should come. And he's like, I had bad experiences with church, but this has changed the way I think about church. And then we were able to connect him because he moved back into the city, which, in an area where we don't have a location. So we connected him with one of the churches that we partner with in the city. And like being able to just be a part of that, which he, months before had no access to. Those are just, for me, really cool things to see happening. And that for me feels like ways that we can press against systemic injustice. Like these are there, we probably won't ever change it, but I think we need to keep pressing against it. That's the goal. I think that for me is the thing we have to keep doing. I have to keep pressing.
That's beautiful. That is beautiful. And it's amazing that when you take the time to invest and involve yourself in the lives of someone like Alexander, come to realize that there will come a moment where they may get out. And as family, then we have the responsibility to, as family, ensure that back into the civilian world is one that can be made much easier because they now have the support and care of a community of people who love them deeply. One of the places I pastored in Tennessee, our jail ministry began with someone like you just described, Amy, someone who couldn't figure out where they fit in any other service, any role. And all of a sudden they just happened to get invited down to a jail to go do a visitation. And it led into a full-fledged jail ministry that then led into a food and clothing pantry, which then led into a Celebrate Recovery service, which then led into the development of a 501c3, all of which came from someone willing to step into and invest their lives in someone. And again, all of a sudden now we're talking about housing and access to basic human needs that outside of a connection of a community of people who love and care for you, they may not have access to. Which may then put them back onto the streets and put them more susceptible to recidivism and all that goes with that. And so I just want to say how much I love the holistic approach that Community 412 and Community Freedom have in engaging the kinds of needs that are out there, that we're given an opportunity with the Lord to partner with him in what he's already at work, what he's already up to in the midst of this. And so I just applaud and thank you all so much for the time you've taken. This has been absolutely great. And I'm looking forward to my students being able to reflect on this, because again, it takes these big, large concepts, breaks them down and says, here's where the church can start. Here's what the church can do. And it just, I think, stirs and evokes. There's nothing like story to stir and evoke the missional imagination of Christ followers, to really lean in and engage the possibilities that are all around us if we'll just exhibit the courage to lean in and step in and do something. So thank you all so much. I greatly appreciate your investment in our students, and I applaud the work you're doing at Community Freedom.
You're welcome. Welcome.
Thank
Thanks
you,
for having us.
Appreciate it.
All right. We'll talk to you all soon. Thank you so much.
Take care.
Thank you.